one afternoon in midsummer, Terry and I were having a conversation, and she said, "We need to talk." And if you remember the last time Terry and I needed to talk, I had to sell everything I owned and move to another country.
Yeah.
So I was a little apprehensive, but she said, we've been here 6 months. What are you going to do? What's your plan? Are you going to get a job? Are you going to, what are you going to do? The business I had moved from America, I had since wrapped up because it turned out not to be practical to service those American customers with a 6 or 7 hour time difference. And it was, their confidence was a bit lost on me after I moved out of the country. And so I just slowly started wrapping up that American business, but I formed a new business over here that was essentially the same thing. And I was a typical web designer, web agency, was doing some Google AdWords stuff and did some social media stuff. And so I had formed the business, had started a bank account, put some money in the bank account, had a limited business set up, and had a box of 2,000 business cards and no customers.
Mm.
And, there's Nigel Farage is on the radio every day talking about these immigrants who come over here and take our jobs and take our women and take our benefits money. And I didn't want to be that guy, so I started a business. And all my life in America, all my business life, I had always used networking as a way to grow other people's businesses, but at some point my own business as well. In America, the first check I ever wrote when I started the last business I owned in America, the first check I ever wrote was to the Chamber of Commerce and joined the Chamber of Commerce. And I've always embraced networking as a marketing tool. So I joined the Chamber of Commerce in the States when I got over here. So when I started that business, got my business cards in hand, I went looking for a networking opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I had been in B&I in the past and thought it was a great organization, but I just didn't want to do that again. It's a bit regimented, and one thing I didn't want was a boss. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't want to be locked into anything. I wanted to find a networking organization that would let me do the things that suited me the most. And so I started looking for something, and on LinkedIn, I stumbled on an organization called For Networking. And they were going to launch a new group just a few miles from home. And so I went, there was an ad or a post, I guess, on LinkedIn, and I followed that link and went to the website for fornetworking.biz and filled out my profile and booked myself into the meeting. And that's how I found For Networking, and that's how I started my business in the UK.
Gotcha. Okay, so you knew that networking was the way you wanted to go because you knew that was going to be the key to really establishing your footing and making the contacts and the connections you needed. You had a good look around. You had an idea. 'Cause, I mean, you're right. There's lots of different networking organizations. Some are very formal. Some are very informal. So I guess one of the important things with choosing a networking organization is pick one. What would you say? Pick one that you can feel comfortable with and that kind of fits you, rather than you having to fit into its way of things. Is that?
Yeah, that's perfectly true. What I liked about For Networking is it offered structure. It offered a lot of opportunity. It was a national organization, and in my mind, I was going to build a national business. Mm-hmm. It allowed me to go where I wanted to go. They had different meetings on different days. It just ticked all the boxes for what I was looking for at the time. It was funny. I went to that first meeting, which was just 5 years ago last week, actually. Went to that first meeting on the day I walked in. I literally knew 9 people in the entire country.
Yeah.
And it was 2 guys at the pub and a few bell ringers and some family. And I walked into that first meeting with no customers, no contacts, no nothing. That was the first business I ever did in the UK, was in that room. Wow. And to say it changed my life sounds really dramatic, but I think anyone who knows me personally would look back and say that it really did change my life.
Yeah,
and it changed who I am. Changed who I am as a person. I think a lot differently now. than I did 5 years ago. For networking made me look at people differently. It made me look at business differently. It made me look at networking differently. Totally changed my worldview.
Wow. All right. So you've realised that you're going to be in the UK for the foreseeable future. You've set up a business. You've got your business card. You've found a network which seems to gel with your way of doing things. You walk into that first meeting knowing nobody there. Now, I know for a lot of people that even taking just that step, walking into that meeting, knowing nobody there is takes a lot of confidence anyway to do that. But then you've got to start speaking with people and all this sort of thing. Take me through that. How do you break through that? Oh my word! I've got to go into this room full of, I don't know anybody there. All this. How do you kind of burst through that and actually get into the room and start speaking with people, or were you one of these ones who kind of hangs around the wall until somebody comes up and says hello? And how do you get through that?
Well, two things that come out of that question you just asked. The first thing is I didn't realize till I was already there that I was the new guy. I didn't. It didn't occur to me until I was well into the room and well into the meeting what I was doing. As far as being a wallflower, that's never really been my style. I'm probably far more extroverted now than I was 5 years ago, because the path my life has taken has kind of forced me to be much more outgoing and energetic and forthcoming in relationships with people. But for at that particular meeting, you couldn't have been a wallflower. For networking has a process, the way they welcome people to meetings, that doesn't let you just walk in the room and be a wallflower. I walked up to the door, and a fella who I later found out was the chairman of For Networking. But at that point, I thought he was just one of the local guys putting on the show. But I walked up to the door, and a fellow named Terry Cooper met me at the door. And by process of elimination, he had just decided I must be Michael. And he said, yeah, hello, you must be Michael. And I said, yes. He said, well, I'm Terry Cooper. I'm on the team here. And I wanted to welcome you to the meeting. Come on in. I'll tell you what to expect. And he kind of took me in under his arm and walked me through the process and told me what to expect over the next 2 hours and how it was going to work and what to do with my business cards. And just kind of gave me a little brief on the meeting, and then he introduced me to a couple of other people that were already in the room. And I never got a chance just to sit down and hide in the corner, because he put me in that environment to where I was networking. And so it was almost instant networking. I was, within minutes of walking in the room, I was talking to people. And
Nice.
there was no way there was no way to be a wallflower.
Yeah.
We go through the meeting, and of course, after everybody else gets there, there's about 38 people there. And we go through the process of the meeting flow, and the first thing that happens in the meeting is that the meeting starts, and then you do what's called the 40-second round. And it's anybody who's been to business networking has done this. It's where you do your little elevator pitch and where you talk about yourself. Mm-hmm. And I was about halfway through the room, and as people worked through the room, it dawned, after about 10 people, it hit me. This is the first time I'm ever going to stand up in front of an English audience and open my mouth. And there was no getting out of it. I was in the middle of the room. I had to walk past all 30 people to escape. And so I stood up and I very awkwardly said, hi, I'm Michael Nagels. I'm with Strother Web Solutions. And if you're smarter than the average person in the room, you'll have already figured out I'm not from around here. And there was a little laugh, a little bit of chuckle, and I went, I'm from Wales. And I sat down. And everybody was looking at each other going, he doesn't sound Welsh. But I just made a joke out of it, because it was going to be the most obvious thing in the room. And the rest of the meeting, every conversation was, so what are you doing here? Why are you here? How'd you get here? Mm-hmm. And it all became about me being American. I couldn't talk about my business because they wanted to know where I came from and what I did and why I was living here. And I kind of sat back from that after that meeting and saw that uniqueness. Whether I liked it or not, I was unique. I didn't intend to be unique. I didn't feel unique, but the reality was I was one American in an organization full of Englishmen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just took advantage of that. I just started playing off the fact that I was an American, because it was, we talk about a USP and a unique selling point and making yourself different and standing out in the crowd. And that was just a great way to stand out, just by going, yep, I'm an American.
Yeah. And I think you touch on something really important there. I know for a lot of people, if they're going to be standing up and speaking in front of any audience anywhere, a lot of people, they've got in their mind that there's something about them that people are going to notice is different, and they kind of try and play that down and almost hide it. Whereas the approach you took, which I've seen time and time again, and it works so well, is basically everybody knows there's this thing that's different. Embrace it right from the start, and you become much more comfortable. Everybody else is much more comfortable, and the whole thing stops being an obstacle and actually becomes a talking point, or an icebreaker. If somebody wants to have a chat with you, at least you've got something that you can break the ice with.
Well, and you can't hide from that uniqueness.
Exactly,
whatever it is, if you're American, if you're Welsh and living in Hertfordshire, if you're Scottish and living in Hertfordshire, if whatever your uniqueness is, don't hide from it. Make that an excuse. The funny thing about networking is that everybody goes to networking to be found. Everybody goes to networking meetings because they want to build a circle of influence, and they want to meet new people, and they want to find new business contacts.
Mm-hmm.
In that context, to not be 100% you and not embrace exactly who you are, because that's often the thing that will make you different from all of your competitors.
Yeah.
And if you're in a room where there's 5 web designers, the one of the first meetings I went to in For Networking after I joined, within a month or two, I was sitting at a meeting, and there were again about 30 people in the room, and we were at round tables of 6, and suddenly realized that of the 6 of us at the table, 4 of us were web designers. Oh. And you sit there and you think, well, how do I stand out from that crowd?
Yeah. Mm.
And so the key thing, if you're trying to be confident and be visible and build credibility and build a circle of influence, the first thing you have to be willing to do is just be 100% you. Just be who you are. Mm. Because nobody else can be who you are.
Well, that is very true, yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard people say hundreds of times over the years, why should I choose you over the other guy? If you hire the other guy, you don't get me. And just people should use that. Mm. If there's 4 web designers in the room and you hire Michael, or you hire Strother Web Solutions, it's no longer in business. The business has been closed down and sold off. But there is none of those other companies had me. And that was the unique selling point.
Yeah. Wow. So, where am I going with this? Yeah. So you're in a room full of strangers, and you it sounds as though you kind of got on well with your talk. But what advice would you give to somebody who is entering a room full of strangers? How can you be immediately confident upon entering that room? Are there any tips that you'd offer? Any advice, suggestions?
Remember why you went there. Remember your purpose. And like I said earlier, your purpose for going to a networking meeting is to meet new people and build relationships that'll eventually lead to some sales. Most people go to networking because they've got something they want to sell. But you can't just walk in the room and start selling. You've got to go through the process. For networking, we use a formula called meet, like, know, and trust. And you've just got to start building the relationship and meeting people. Mm-hmm. And the thing to remember, if you're brand new, the minute you walk in that room, you're brand new, is everybody who's going to be in that room was brand new at least once. And they all started in the same position you're in. And the other thing to remember is that many of the people in that room won't even know that you're new. They don't know that you've never been there before. And so it's a mindset thing.
Yeah.
And you've got 2 choices when you walk into any new situation like that. You can walk in and be gentle and be soft and be demure, or you can walk in and own the room. And if you make a decision to just walk